It is my annual mission to see at least 12 films in the cinema, and seeing the year is almost at an end, I thought it would be a good time to look back at what I saw in 2024. This year started strong with Poor Things, an off-kilter retelling of the Frankenstein story. Every single element of this film is bizarre. The writing, the acting, the camera work, the editing, all strange. But it turns out 4 wrongs do make a right, and the film is really enjoyable. My only issue is that it rattles past the ending, making it about half an hour longer than it feels like it should really be. The Holdovers is the story of a student at boarding school who doesn't get to go back home for Christmas, so is spending the festive season with everyone's least favourite teacher. I really liked this film. It's a comedy with heart and a real old school aesthetic. I would probably say it was my film of the year. The only thing that would have improved my viewing experience would be seeing it at Christmas time, rather than in February when it was released in the UK. I saw the first June film when it was released and I was blown away by it. It's the fact that it's a hard science fiction film aimed at grown-ups, something I hadn't seen in a cinema for some years. So I was of course going to see the second movie, which covers the second part of the first book. And it was okay. Yeah. By no means bad, don't get me wrong, it's just it didn't wow me like the first film. It was alright. Ghostbusters has been a big part of my life growing up. I didn't really love the 2016 film, but I also didn't hate it. But I was nervous to see Afterlife when it came out because I didn't want it to be Ghostbusters 2016 Part 2. But I, like a lot of people, ended up really enjoying that film. And I think a lot of people were expecting Frozen Empire to be like that, and it isn't. Instead, it's more like the real Ghostbusters cartoon series, and I don't see that as a bad thing. I guess you would describe Alex Garland's Civil War as a dystopian thriller set in a politically divided America, if you could imagine such a thing. I think the smart thing about this movie is it somehow manages to be politically neutral. It's never stated if the president in charge of this mess is a Republican or a Democrat, leaving the viewer to impose the image of whomever they think is leading the world to ruin over the top. The production company, A24, are the Miramax of their day, and they're really pushing out some of the best material being released at the moment. With the exception of the Tim Burton film, I like all of the Planet of the Apes movies, old and new. And after Rise of the Planet of the Apes and its 2 sequels, I thought Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes might have nowhere else to go. But it does, and it doesn't feel like a rehash of what's come before it. It feels in tone with the original films, but looks like the newer ones. And although they've gotten away with it this time, I hope it's not a sign of a new trilogy coming, because for some reason people these days think movies can only come in 3s. It's funny because I think I enjoyed Fly Me to the Moon when I saw it. Romantic comedies seem to be a lost art these days, but Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum were charismatic and witty, and the plot of faking the moon landing almost certainly amused. But looking back on the film now, all I can remember is the old couple who talked throughout. Literally throughout. Who's that? It's Woody Harrelson. Who? Woody Harrelson. Now who's that in the movie? I never tell people off for talking. I normally just sit there and stew in my own hate. But after an hour, I snapped and told them to shut up. And that worked for about 20 minutes. And then they started talking again, so I had to keep telling them to shut up every 20 minutes thereafter. If you want to fucking chat, do it in the foyer. I knew nothing about Trap going in other than who directed it, M. Night Shyamalan, and I was under the impression that this was a serious thriller. But pretty soon I found myself giggling and then laughing out loud. And I don't think I was laughing at it. I can't imagine any other reason you'd make a To Catch a Killer movie where you're on the side of the serial killer unless it was meant as a very black comedy. And with that in mind, it's good fun. I was sat next to what I assumed to be a mother and daughter in this screening, who were clearly into the movie, but between them felt the need to discuss everything that was going to happen next while it was happening. After the events of the last movie, I jumped on this with a gentle shh, and they decided to change seats. I'm of the belief that if you can't stay quiet for 2 hours and turn your phone off, then the cinema is not for you. I had a completely different cinema experience for Beetlejuice 2, as I was the only one in the screening. I'm not sure why the turnout for this movie was so low, unless the cinema-going public had heard that I was going to be there and they're now all avoiding me. Beetlejuice 2 is like Beetlejuice 1, only in present day. I like Beetlejuice 1, and because of that, I like Beetlejuice 2, though it did feel unneeded. I don't like superheroes, with the exception of Batman, who has no superpowers, so I guess that makes him more of a vigilante, and these darker and darker interpretations really appeal, including the Joker. I went to see this having read no press, and I came out of it having enjoyed 3/4 of it. What I think let it down was the "neh" ending. I wanted Lee to be responsible for the explosion that disrupts the court case, and the Joker to renounce Arthur, and him and Lee to go off on a Bonnie and Clyde style spree, and that didn't happen. But at no point did the music bother me. In fact, I have the soundtrack album. The Holdovers is the best of the films I saw this year, and this is by far the worst. In fact, Red One might be considered the worst film of last year too, as that's when it was supposed to be released. But delays in filming, caused by the star who got paid $15 million to be in this, pushed the release back. It was made with the intention of being released direct to Amazon Prime, but I assume the increasing budget caused them to upscale the release in an effort to claw some money back. What a waste of time. The film is a mess and it looks like it's been re-edited to make up for missing footage. It was made for streaming, so of course it's visually ugly. The Rock looks bored out of his mind with the material, and there's an inappropriate amount of swearing for a kids' film, and it goes on for way too long. A lot of the reviews would have you believe that Megalopolis is a disaster, and it really isn't. In fact, in rereading the reviews, having seen the film myself makes me believe a lot of them are in bad faith, calling the acting bad when it's clearly a stylised performance, and criticising the green screen as if this movie was even attempting naturalism. I think the real reason this movie gets bad reviews is political. It can be read as an allegory for Trump and Elon Musk, whether that be intended or not, and it's quite kind to the character who could be read as Elon. Give it some years and I think it will be looked back upon with kinder eyes than it is now. And that just about sums up all the films I saw at the cinema this year. I did also go to see a release of Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon at the Prince Charles in Leicester Square. In fact, here's a picture of me and my friend Emmy just before we went in. But that's not a new release, so I haven't included it. All in all, I think it's been an okay year for films. A few too many sequels for my taste, but they weren't bad. Though I do think a lot of people have got far too used to watching films at home, so they're not even aware that they could be disturbing other people while they talk. The cinema isn't cheap. Try not to ruin it for other people. Do subscribe if you want to keep up to date with my content. I've got lots of stuff coming out in the new year. I'm Scott Kingsnorth, and I'm making a movie.